I'm sure that we can all remember the year of 2020, a year of chaos. Cities burning, empty grocery shelves. There was a lot going on that year. In fact, so much that a lot was foreshadowed by the year of 2020. One thing that went unnoticed during that year was the violent crime. Crimes that happened that didn't get the recognition it deserved. One of those stories was a girl who went by the name of Ty'kerria Dawson, a 17-year-old girl from Maryland, someone who lost their life in a tragic and heartbreaking way. It's a case that seems all too familiar, and when her story concludes, it's another reminder to watch the people close to you. June 28th, 2002. The world would make way for Ty'kerria Dawson. She would be born in St. Agnes Hospital located in Baltimore, Maryland, but the place she called home was Hagerstown, Maryland. She would be brought into this world by her mother, Ty'kerria Dawson, but she was also raised by a woman who went by the name of Barbara Lee. Shortly after Ty'kerria was born, Barbara Lee would gain custodial privileges alongside of her mother. Ty'kerria would spend most of her life in the Bethel Gardens residential community, where she would be raised with one brother and 4 sisters. Ty'kerria is described as a good kid, someone who enjoyed singing, dancing, playing with her nieces and nephews, as well as playing basketball. Her family describes her as someone who was full of life, someone who had a smile that could light up the room. Hagerstown would also be the place where she would receive her education. She would transition from elementary to Northern Middle School before ultimately landing at North Hagerstown High School. While at this high school, having the beautiful personality she had, people were quickly drawn to her, and she made a lot of friends. She would quickly become known as the vivacious girl who could always place a smile upon your face. If you were in a down mood, she would be there to pick you up. While Ty'kerria was attending North Hagerstown High School, she would experience a loss in her life. Barbara Lee would pass away, someone whom she'd also had considered to be her mother. During this rough patch in her life, a student that was normally well behaved would begin to slip a little. Someone who was normally reading and paying attention in class was beginning to get in a little trouble. She would even get into a fight. But after this fight, she would end up being transferred to Antietam High School, where the old Ty'kerria would emerge once more. Her teachers describe her as someone who was eager to learn, someone with an outspoken voice, someone who didn't mind sticking up for other students. In fact, in the year of 2019, Ty'kerria alone would approach the Board of Education in order to talk about the bullying that went on in the school. At that point in time, she was frustrated with how the school was being ran, and she even told the Board of Education that without enough being done, they were complicit in the act. That's the type of person Ty'kerria was. She was selfless, always thinking about the next person before herself. In the year of 2020, Ty'kerria Dawson would graduate from Antietam High School and begin to plan her future. Her plan was to attend Hagerstown Community College for the fall semester, where she was taking up criminal justice. That comes at no surprise, seeing that she didn't mind sticking up for others. Ty'kerria was someone who was loving, giving, someone who was also smart and compassionate about the things she felt strongly about, someone who was undoubtedly headed for the stars. Sadly, Ty'kerria would never make it to the first day of college because over the summer, tragedy would arise. that would not only claim her life, but it would alter everyone else's around her. June 27th, 2020. At approximately 5:10 p.m., Frederick County Sheriff's Office would be dispatched to a wooded area. At this time, officers are responding to a call that someone had just located a deceased victim, and after arriving on the scene, the police would come across the body of a young female.
Also developing tonight, police are on the scene of a death investigation in Frederick County. Officers found a body along the walking trail behind Brer Grove Court. The person has not been identified. We're working to get more information.
According to neighbors, the Hagerstown teenager's body was found along a creek bed near this treehouse. Investigators have not revealed what brought her here in the first place. The sheriff's office has not identified the victim. In a news release, investigators say she had, quote, apparent injuries, end quote. The sheriff's office says the investigation into the circumstances of her death is ongoing. Sheriff's office investigators believe the teen was targeted and that the public is not in danger. The teenager's body was taken to the chief medical examiner's office in Baltimore for an autopsy.
The victim would later be identified as 17-year-old Ty'kerria Dawson. But to add insult to injury, Ty'kerria was found one day before her 18th birthday. At the crime scene, officers would locate .45 caliber shell casings, as well as clothing that they would bag and tag for DNA analysis. At the beginning of the investigation, the family would be questioned, and they were asked if they knew anyone who would want to harm her. But Ty'kerria was a loving person, so when questioned on whether or not she had any enemies, they couldn't name one. After speaking to the family, they would move on to her inner circle, her friends. But after the interviews concluded, they were still no closer to finding the culprit. One of the last interviews that the authorities would conduct would be with the boyfriend of Ty'kerria Dawson, then 16-year-old Richard Cartnell. Richard Cartnell was a guy who had been dating Ty'kerria for several months, and by all accounts, people said they were a great couple. No problems. When questioned about Ty'kerria, he said that the last time he saw her was June 26 of 2020. That's approximately one day before she was found. He says that Ty'kerria came over to visit him and she took an Uber. But shortly after arriving, they got into an argument, and he says afterwards she left, and he hadn't seen her since. After all the interviews were conducted, the authorities were still at square one. They had a deceased young girl with no clue as to why it happened. So, during the course of the investigation, they did the only thing they could do, and that was to turn towards the media in hopes to generate new leads. After turning to the media, leads would begin to pour in. But one lead would be very significant. Residential surveillance would capture Richard Cartnell walking alongside of Ty'kerria Dawson in the early morning hours of June 27th of 2020, shortly after midnight. Armed with this evidence, this proves that Richard was lying about Ty'kerria leaving and him not knowing where she was. So Richard Cartnell would once again be dragged down to headquarters for interrogation. At first, when being questioned, he would maintain his story until he was confronted with the surveillance tape, in which afterwards he would break. He would cave in and tell the authorities exactly what transpired on that evening. On the evening of June 26 of 2020, Ty'kerria Dawson had left her home in Hagerstown to visit her boyfriend in Frederick, Maryland. While Ty'kerria was at the home of Richard, a girl had called his phone, and afterwards, an argument ensued. After the argument was over, Richard Cartnell then walked Ty'kerria Dawson to the wooded area. Again, this area is referred to as the cut, a shortcut that students took going to and from school. So it was an area that was known by many people. So as Ty'kerria Dawson is walking with Richard Cartnell, she's not thinking anything about it, not knowing that she was being led to her death. These next details that you're about to hear are very hard, because you're about to find out that the argument isn't why she lost her life, and that this was something that was planned before she even came over. I stated that the argument took place because a female had called Richard's phone, and Ty'kerria was upset about it. This female that called was none other than then 14-year-old Ty'kerria Dawson. Ty'kerria at the time was a girl who was also romantically involved with Richard, unbeknownst to Ty'kerria. On the evening of June 26, after the argument between Ty'kerria and Richard, Richard had called Ty'kerria and told her to meet him in that area and hand him a book bag. He told Ty'kerria that his plan on that night was to kill her, to get rid of her. So, when Richard walks Ty'kerria to the wooded area, he walks over and he greets Ty'kerria. He then retrieves the book bag. Inside of this book bag is a pair of gloves, a firearm, and a change of clothes. Ty'kerria says that he first took the gloves out of the bag. Then he put the firearm into his waistband. Ty'kerria says that after he gets the firearm, he then walks over to Ty'kerria. He puts his arm around her shoulder, and they both walk off. Ty'kerria says that shortly after walking off is when she heard 3 separate gunshots. The shots that she heard on that night was Richard ending Ty'kerria's life. He had shot her 3 times in the head area. He then meets back up with Ty'kerria and he changes his clothes, and they both leave the wooded area, leaving behind the lifeless body of 17-year-old Ty'kerria Dawson.
2 teenagers in Frederick County have been arrested and charged with the murder of another teenager.
It's certainly a sad situation. Our investigators have worked really hard on this case for the past few days, and it certainly affected everyone. Just the ages that are involved here, it's incredibly sad.
14-year-old Ty'kerria Dawson and 16-year-old Richard Cartnell III have been charged with first-degree murder in connection to the death of 17-year-old Ty'kerria Dawson.
Love y'all, but I gotta check my DMs. Say bye to honey. Say bye.
We did something that we can't bury. Doesn't matter if we close our eyes. We did something that I can't carry. So tonight, let's pretend.
Who likes my hair today? Who likes my hair? Who likes my hair?
After Richard confessed what happened, Ty'kerria would also be arrested, and they would both be charged with conspiracy to commit murder as well as first-degree murder. Although Richard had confessed, before court came, his story would change. His mother had said she didn't believe her son had did this, and that the confession was coerced. She states that her son was interrogated without an attorney and without her being present. At the time of the incident, Richard Cartnell was 16 years old, which makes him a minor.
I would want my son to come home, but he didn't. I just don't think he did it.
Yvette Jackson is Cartnell's mother. She said her son had been dating the 17-year-old for months. She doesn't think he would do something like this.
No. because that boy would never do that.
Yvette Jackson says she hasn't been able to speak with her son.
I just pray to God that I can get him help. That's all I can say.
The family of Richard Cartnell and his attorney would make a motion to throw out his confession. But at this point in time, his confession wasn't needed. Both Kalia and Richard were being charged as adults. During the process, the prosecutors would strike a deal with 14-year-old Kalia, and they would tell her that they would take her case to juvenile court in return for her testimony against Richard. Well, Kalia took the deal. She would take the stand and help the prosecution secure conviction. When it comes to a motive in this case, there isn't one clear cut, but there are a few details about the case I haven't said. And one of them is the fact that Ty'kerria Dawson was pregnant at the time of the incident. If you factor that in with the fact that he was seeing another girl, then 14-year-old Kalia, it's kind of obvious. In my opinion, I don't think he wanted the baby to ever see the light of day. What happened to 17-year-old Ty'kerria Dawson is completely a tragic story. It's heartbreaking in so many ways. And to think she lost her life one day before turning 18. But even worse, she was taken out by the hands of someone she thought loved her. Someone she saw a future with, who didn't see that future with her. Rest in peace, Ty'kerria Dawson. Thank you for being a light for others.
Show me how to cope. Show me how to forget that we did something that we can't bury. Doesn't matter if we close our eyes. We did something that I can't carry. So tonight, let's pretend that we are lighter than the wind. Oh, I need a break. Teach me how to bend. 'Cause right now I'm breaking since we did something that we can't bury. Doesn't matter if we close our eyes. We did something that I can't carry. So tonight, let's pretend that we are nowhere to be found.